In Enugu, women rushed to a smiling market man who sold bras at prices too good to be true. But what they didn't know was that behind his cheap bargains were condemned foams, harsh chemicals, and charms hidden under laughter. One woman wore his bra. She bought and wore it to save money. And days later, she felt a lump in her breast. Watch this before you ever buy a bra from market men. Welcome to Folktales by Chisom, where modern stories carry hidden warnings and real-life lessons. Sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. The scream didn't come from pain at first. It came from confusion. Nessy dropped the bra on the floor and stared at her chest in the cracked mirror of her one-room apartment. The skin that had been smooth just days ago now looked angry, red, swollen, almost bruised. She touched it gently and flinched. A sharp heat pulsed beneath her skin as though something alive had been planted there. Her heart raced. "Jesus," she whispered. Just 5 days ago, she had laughed in the market. Everyone laughed around Uncle Dilo. At Ogbete Main Market, Enugu, Uncle Dilo's stall was impossible to miss. Even with your eyes closed, you would find him by his voice. Loud jokes, playful insults, the kind of laughter that carried across stalls, pulling people toward him like music. "Seek confidence," he would shout. "Madam, this brag will lift your future." Women loved him. Younger girls, working-class mothers, students from Esut, even married women pretending they were just passing. His prices were scandalously low. His bras, firm, heavy, perfectly padded, felt stronger than boutique ones. And Uncle Dilo never looked like a cheat. His face was round and friendly. His eyes sparkled with humor. He remembered customers by name. He prayed loudly when rain threatened his table. He joked with security men. People trusted him because he seemed familiar, like someone's uncle, someone's neighbor. When Nessy stopped at his stall that afternoon, she hadn't planned to buy anything. She was a seamstress, barely surviving. Customers had reduced. Rent was knocking. She needed a proper bra to fit a new dress she wanted to model on herself to attract clients. Uncle Dilo noticed her hesitation immediately. "Fine girl, come, touch am." She squeezed the foam. It bounced back instantly. "How much?" she asked quietly. He leaned close, dropping his voice. "For you, small thing." It felt like a blessing. That night, Nessy wore the bra proudly. The lift was perfect. Her dress sat beautifully. She felt confident again, whole again. She slept peacefully. Nothing happened the next day. Nothing happened the day after. That was how it always started. On the fourth day, while sewing at her machine, a strange warmth crept across her chest. She wiped sweat and continued working. That night, the itching came. Not ordinary itching, deep, desperate, crawling. By morning, her skin was red. She blamed the heat. She blamed stress. Then came the pain. A dull ache that turned sharp when she moved. A sensitive spot under her skin that felt thicker than it should be. When she pressed it, her breath caught. That was when fear entered the room. Unbeknownst to Nessy, she wasn't alone. Across Ogbete, other women were waking up to strange sensations. A food seller noticed blisters. A student returned from lectures feverish. A married woman complained of constant burning. And at sunset, while the market slept, Uncle Dilo walked into a quiet compound near the old coal camp, unlocked a rusted metal door, and lit a single bulb. Inside were buckets lined the floor, chemical bottles with faded labels, expired liquid. Foam scraps lay scattered, yellowed, uneven, stamped faintly with one clear word: rejected. The sharp chemical smell stung the nose. Uncle Dilo rolled up his sleeves, wiped his hands on a rag, and went to work. The fire burned low in the small room. Uncle Dilo poured the thick chemical into the bucket and stirred slowly. The foam scraps, dirty, yellowed, stamped rejected, groaned softly as they softened under the heat. The smell was sharp enough to sting his eyes. He pressed the soaked foam into a metal push-up mold and forced it shut with his weight, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Women like firmness," he muttered. By morning, the foam would be hard again, toxic, silent, perfect. He sprayed perfume generously. Then he laughed. The market loved laughter. Outside, the night was quiet. By morning, laughter would return to Ogbete, and with it, danger disguised as a bargain. By the 6th morning, Nessy could no longer pretend. She woke up before dawn, her chest throbbing as if someone had pressed hot coal beneath her skin overnight. The room felt close, airless. When she sat up, pain ripped through her and she gasped aloud. Carefully, she loosened her nightwear and stood before the mirror again. The redness had spread. Thin lines of darker skin now traced around the sensitive area, and the lump felt harder, more real, not imagined, not fear, real. Her hands shook. She wrapped herself in a loose wrapper and left the room before her neighbor could wake. She needed answers, not pity. At the small health center near Gariki, the nurse frowned as she examined her. "How long has this been?" the woman asked, her tone slow and cautious. "Less than 1 week." "What did you change recently?" Nessy hesitated. "Nothing, except a new bra." The nurse paused, looked up. "Where did you buy it?" "Ogbete." The silence that followed was louder than words. The nurse stepped back, washed her hands longer than necessary, then returned wearing gloves, though she hadn't used them before. "You are not the first this week," she said quietly. The words landed like stones. Back in the market that afternoon, the air felt thick. Not from smoke, not from heat, but from murmurs. 2 stalls away from Uncle Dilo, a woman selling tomatoes complained loudly of rashes. Across the walkway, a young girl scratched her chest absent-mindedly while listening to her friend. Near the bus stop, an older woman argued with a chemist over ointment that wasn't working. Something was happening. But Uncle Dilo's stall remained lively. Laughter broke through the whispers. Music played. Women still hovered, reaching, squeezing, bargaining. Uncle Dilo cracked jokes as always, his voice confident, carefree. "Madam, if your bra no strong, your confidence go weak." Everyone laughed. Nessy stood at a distance, watching, her chest born just standing there. Every joke now sounded different, too loud, too rehearsed. Linda, a hairstylist whose store was 3 rows down, noticed her. "You look pale," Linda said, lowering her voice. "You okay?" Nessy swallowed. "That bra." Linda's eyes flickered. "What about it?" "I think something is wrong." Linda glanced around before leaning closer. "Mine too," she whispered. "After bathing, the smell comes out, chemical-like. I thought it was just me." That was the moment fear multiplied. Over the next few days, stories connected like threads. Another pepper seller said her skin began peeling. A newlywed muttered that her doctor advised her to stop wearing any bra at all. They all had one thing in common: Uncle Dilo. But when complaints reached him, he dismissed them with laughter. "Now your different body reacts. God creates us uniquely." And somehow, his luck never ran out. A competitor who tried sourcing bras to sell beside him suddenly claimed customers stopped noticing her. Another trader said her goods fell into dirty gutter mysteriously. Some whispered that Uncle Dilo had soft protection. Nothing heavy, just enough to confuse eyes and vines. That night, back in his hideout, Uncle Dilo walked slowly, carefully. He mixed expired chemicals into soaked foam, stirring with a thick wooden stick. He wiped his hands on a rag and checked the molds.
The push-up shapes hardened beautifully, firm, smooth, irresistible. Market women know they ask questions, now price them they see. He sprayed heavy perfume over the finished bras and stacked them carefully. Back in her room, Nessy soaked a towel in cold water and pressed it against her chest, fighting tears. The pain was no longer the worst part. The fear was.
By the week that followed, Ogbete main market no longer sounded the same. The laughter was still there. The shouting, bargaining, music and insults still filled the air. But beneath it all ran something quieter. Alert eyes, lowered voices, questions that weren't being asked loudly yet. Nessy felt it as soon as she stepped into the market. Walking had become painful. Every movement pulled at her chest, reminding her of the swelling beneath her skin. She moved slower now, holding her wrapper tighter, avoiding accidental touches from rushing buyers. At her sewing stall, customers noticed. "Ne, you dey all right?" one asked. Nessy forced a smile. "I'm fine." But Linda was not convinced. That afternoon, Linda stormed over, her face tight with anger. "Did you hear what happened near the fish section?" Nessy shook her head. A girl fainted, started shaking. People thought it was heat until she screamed. She kept shouting that her chest was burning. Nessy's stomach dropped. They both knew where the story would lead. A small crowd had already gathered near Uncle Dilo's store. Not the usual buyers. These ones stood back, arms folded, eyes sharp. Phones were out. Whispering turned to murmuring. One woman spoke first. "Oga, explain this thing." Uncle Dilo laughed, though his laughter sounded slightly rushed today. "Explain waiting. Market always the dramatic." Another woman stepped forward and raised her blouse slightly, showing angry red patches. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This happened after wearing your bra." Uncle Dilo waved his hand dismissively. "Na allergy. Go hospital." But the crowd didn't scatter. Linda pushed forward next, her voice trembling with controlled rage. "Why does the smell change when we sweat? Why clinic they see many of us?" Phones lifted higher. For a brief moment, just a second, Uncle Dilo's smile slipped. Then it returned, wider than before. "You people like drama too much. If you no like my goods, move." That was when it happened. From the edge of the crowd, a woman screamed. Everyone turned. Linda collapsed. Her body stiffened, hands clawing at her chest as she fell hard onto the dusty ground. Panic exploded. Someone shouted her name. Another screamed for water. Phones recorded everything, the cries, the confusion, Linda gasping in pain. Nessy pushed through the crowd and knelt beside her. "Linda! Linda!" Linda's eyes were wide, terrified. "Burning," she whispered. "My chest." Security rushed in. Market leaders shouted. Confusion reigned. And throughout it all, Uncle Dilo stood frozen. For the first time since Nessy had known him, he said nothing. By evening, the video was everywhere. Groups buzzed, statuses circulated. Screens showed Linda screaming, clutching her chest, people pointing toward Uncle Dilo's stall in the background. Questions followed quickly now. Why the same vendor? Why the same symptoms? Why silence before? Nessy sat alone that night, phone glowing in her dark room, reading comments from women she didn't even know. Women describing the same pain, the same smell, the same burning, the same regret. Whatever Uncle Dilo was selling was no longer just cheap, it was dangerous. And for the first time, Nessy started thinking beyond her own fear. She started thinking about the truth. Sleep abandoned Nessy completely. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Linda falling, her body hitting the ground, dust rising, voices screaming her name. When dawn finally came, Nessy's chest throbbed worse than before, the pain now steady and relentless, as if it had decided to stay. By morning, news had spread beyond Ugbete. Local radio whispered about dangerous undergarments,
Churches included prayers for women with strange sickness. Clinics quietly wrote identical notes in patient files. And Uncle Dilo's stall stayed closed. That absence was louder than his laughter ever had been. Linda survived the night, but her condition worsened. The lump in her chest had grown alarmingly fast, and the skin around it darkened unnaturally. Doctors ordered further tests. Nurses whispered when they thought no one noticed. Nessy sat by Linda's bedside, gripping her own wrapper tightly. "We can't keep quiet," Linda murmured weakly. "If we do, other women—" Nessy nodded, though fear crawled up her spine. That fear found her that same evening. She was closing her door when she noticed it. Something small tied to her door handle. A black thread wrapped around dried leaves, stained dark. She froze. Her neighbor, Mama Eunice, sucked in air sharply. "Remove them and burn it now." Nessy's hands trembled as she did. By nightfall, rumors reached her ears. Someone had seen Uncle Dilo entering a compound near the old coal camp late at night. A boy claimed he often carried heavy black bags from there before dawn. Another trader mentioned a strange chemical smell coming from that direction whenever rain fell. Nessy followed the lead quietly. 2 days later, guided by fear and anger, she stood outside the compound, concrete walls dark with age, a rusted metal gate barely holding. The air stung her nose. She did not need to go. The smell told the story. Authorities arrived the same week, prompted by public pressure and Linda's viral video. When they forced the gate open, even seasoned officers stepped back. Inside were molds shaped like bras, buckets filled with foam scraps, some clearly marked rejected, stacks of expired chemical containers, gloves stiff with residue, a single bulb hanging overhead, swinging slightly. It wasn't production, it was exploitation. Uncle Dilo disappeared before arrest. That night, Nessy cried, not from pain, but from rage. The next day, she spoke. She spoke to reporters, to women, to anyone listening. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. They sold us poison because it was cheap. They trusted our silence. Threats followed, anonymous calls, warnings to focus on yourself, stones thrown at her window. But the damage was done. Truth had begun to breathe.
Once the truth escaped Ogbete, it refused to stay quiet. Investigators returned to the market with faces that no longer smiled politely. They questioned traders, seized leftover stock, and marked Uncle Dilo's space with red tape that fluttered like a warning sign. His once crowded stall now stood empty, abandoned, the wooden table scarred with old price chalk and perfume stains. But silence does not erase fear. Women whispered that night spirits would follow anyone who testified. Some said Uncle Dilo had powerful friends. Others claimed he would return. Nessy felt it most. Anonymous calls came late at night, heavy breathing, then silence. Once someone murmured her name before hanging up. Another time a voice warned, "Leave this matter or you'll regret it." Her landlord suggested she calm down. A fellow trader avoided her eyes. Even friends pulled back, afraid to be associated with trouble. Yet the stories kept coming. A woman arrived from Nosoka with similar burns. Another from Agbakba brought receipts and photos. Doctors began comparing notes. Patterns formed clearly now. Prolonged exposure, sweat, heat, chemical reaction. The investigation uncovered more. Uncle Dilo had once worked briefly at a foam factory, fired for misconduct. Years later, he began collecting rejected scraps, expired adhesives, chemicals never meant for skin. He studied molds online, learned push-up shapes by trial, market feedback, and his guide. Profit sharpened curiosity into crime. Linda recovered slowly. The damage to her chest remained extensive. Sitting beside her one afternoon, Nessy felt the weight of choice pressing down hard.
Stopping now would be easy. Continuing meant risk. That night, Nessy recorded a video. Not dramatic, not angry, just honest. She spoke about trust, about cheap goods, about ignoring small warnings until pain forced attention. She showed her medical papers without showing her wounds. She warned, calmly, firmly. By the next morning, the video spread beyond Enugu. Support poured in. So did backlash. But there was no turning back now. Some truths demand witnesses. The market recovered slowly. Ogbete never shut down completely. It was too alive for that. But something had shifted. The noise returned first. Shouting traders, bargaining voices, music bouncing off zinc roofs. What didn't return was blind trust. Women touched foam more cautiously now. They sniffed. They asked questions. Some walked away. Uncle Dilo did not come back. Weeks after the investigation began, authorities finally tracked him to a border town. He was arrested quietly, without drama. In his room, they found more evidence. Molds, notebooks filled with supply costs, scribbled calculations beside women's sizes. No apology, no remorse. Just profit tallied neatly. The case moved through channels slowly, like everything else, but the damage was already written on bodies. Linda was discharged after months of treatment. She no longer styled hair the way she used to. Standing for too long hurts, but she smiled more now. A soft smile, the kind that survives storms. Nessy's healing was uneven. The swelling reduced, the pain dulled, but the lump remained. Smaller, quieter, but present. Doctors explained gently. Time might help. Maybe surgery, maybe not. The mirror no longer frightened her, but it no longer lied either. One evening, months later, Nessy returned to Ogbete not as a trader, but as a visitor. She walked past stalls without rushing, past new vendors shouting prices just as cheap, just as tempting. At Uncle Dilo's old spot, a different trader sold socks. She paused. The place looked ordinary now, too ordinary for what had happened there. A young girl approached the sock seller, hesitated, then turned away, shaking her head. Nessy watched her disappear into the crowd and felt something loosen inside her chest. Not pain this time, relief. That night, Nessy recorded one final message. She didn't mention names, she didn't show scars. She simply said, "Not everything cheap is a blessing. Some things are cheap because they were rejected. If your body warns you, listen. Silence always costs more." The video didn't go viral like the first, but it reached the people it needed to, and that was enough. Long after Uncle Dilo's laughter faded from the market, his legacy remained, not in profit, but in caution. A lesson whispered between women, passed hand to hand like wisdom earned the hard way. Because some dangers don't come dressed as monsters. Some come smiling, joking, selling bargains.